few more seats at tables up front if people are looking for spots. It is really such a joy and an honor to welcome everyone here this evening. Thank you for coming out on this chilly night. I'm so glad the roads cleared up enough for us to be here. And it is especially an honor and a joy to welcome our guests for this evening. We're going to start in a moment with the ritual of Havdalah, which means separation, and which is the ritual that marks the end of the Jewish Sabbath, the end of the day of rest, and marks our movement back into the week ahead and into the work ahead. So I just wanted to say a word about that, and then we'll begin with Havdalah, with some singing, and then continue with some fuller introductions of our guests and of the conversation this evening. But just a word about this ritual that marks the transition from the day of rest and into the week and the work ahead. It's really a ritual of renewal, and a ritual in which we reawaken the senses with the taste of sweet wine, with the fragrance of spices, and with the opening of the eyes to the light that's before us, with the candle of Havdalah. And we give thanks for the deep well that never runs dry, and for the waters that sustain and strengthen us all. So what I wanted to say as we move into Havdalah is that each of our guests this evening, Reverend Fred Small, Reverend Mariama White Hammond, and Rabbi Shoshana Friedman, I think are people who model for us what it means to draw from that deep well. And in doing so, they help all of us access those sustaining waters. And I wanted to give just one personal example because, as with so many things in life, sometimes they know it and sometimes they don't, the ways in which they touch so many of us. I've been listening to the music of Reverend Fred Small for, I think, about 30 years now. And I really, honestly, just this week remembered that one of his songs was actually on the birth tape that I used during labor and delivery. And that was the song, Everything's Possible. So I just wanted to say, among other things, thank you all for reminding us of what's possible.
Blessings over the wine, the spices, the candle, and then a general blessing, praising God for making distinctions, separations in the world. Please join me in that.
Amen.
extinguishing the candle into the wine, we create a beautiful concoction of sweetness and light. And setting, you could actually dab it behind you for the week ahead. May your week be sweet and full of light. Shavua tov.
Bright morning star arising, bright morning star arising, bright morning star arising. Days are breaking in my soul. Bright morning star arising, days are breaking in my soul. This song began as a kind of sleepy Appalachian hymn, and then Court Dorsey at the Seabrook anti-nuclear demonstrations kicked it up a notch and turned it into this movement anthem, Bright Morning Star. Please rise in body or in spirit. Music is about community, it's about participation. We are not the experts up here doing it for you. We are inviting you to join us in song, Bright Morning Star. Bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising. Days are breaking in my soul. There's some wonderful harmonies to be found in this song. I love what Pete Seeger used to say about harmony. He said harmony is any note that your neighbor isn't singing. Bright morning star. Bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising. Days are breaking in my soul. For the healing of creation. 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 Days are breaking in my soul. Peace in every nation. For peace in every nation. For peace in every nation. For peace in every nation. Days are breaking in my soul. For justice and compassion. For justice and compassion. For justice and compassion. For justice and compassion. Days are breaking in my soul. For the future of our children. For the future of our children. For the future of our children. Days are breaking in my soul. Bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising, bright morning star rising. Days are breaking in my soul. Beautiful sound. You sing much better than the Unitarian Universalists.
So some time ago, after an action with clergy, including Fred and Mariama, maybe others of you in this room, I was at a debrief session with Marla Markham, who's a model for me and an inspirational friend in this work, and she's here tonight. And she told the story of a young woman named Heather who had been doing some peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience for climate justice and had been treated really, really poorly by the courts and the law enforcement. And Heather had said in a communication with Marla, they thought they could bury us, they didn't know we are seeds. And that was the first time I had heard that line, but it actually goes much further back. The Zapatistas made it famous in the 1990s, and it was first coined by a Greek poet, what's his last name? All right, I'm forgetting his name, I apologize to him, but he gets the credit, and he was a gay Greek poet in the 1970s, and he coined that term. And Fred and I turned it into a song. They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. We are seeds, we are seeds, seeds, seeds. We are seeds,
they could fracture us, they didn't know. They thought they could fracture us, they didn't know. They thought they could fracture us, they didn't know. We are one. We are one. We are one. We are one. We are one.
They thought they could wall us out.
They thought they could wall us out, they didn't know. They thought they could wall us out, they didn't know. They thought they could wall us out, they didn't know.
We are here.
We are here. We are here. We are here. We are here.
They thought they could bury us.
They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. They thought they could bury us, they didn't know. We are seeds, we are seeds, seeds, we are seeds, seeds, we are seeds, seeds, we are seeds.
Talk about awakening the senses. So, just a couple of words of introduction again, and then we will move into some reflections and sharing of stories and thoughts, and more song, a lot more song over the course of the evening. So starting with introductions from my far right, left, my far left, Rabbi Shoshana Meira Friedman is the assistant rabbi at Temple Sinai of Brookline. She's a leader in the interfaith.
Thanks for coming out, folks.
She's a leader in the interfaith climate justice movement and recently started clergyclimateaction.org. And I also have to foul and say she is a graduate of our rabbinical school here at Universalist College and a very beloved student and teacher. Reverend Mariama White-Hammond is the Ecological Justice Minister at Bethel AME Church, and Reverend Mariama uses her preaching, writing, singing, and activism to foster a spirit-led intersectional movement for justice. And Reverend Fred Small is Minister for Climate Justice at Arlington Street Church, Unitarian Universalist, the ones he just insulted, they're singing.
How many EUs in the house? All right.
And really just delighted to welcome all three of you. I also wanted to say a note of thanks to the Rita and Stanley Kaplan Foundation for making this evening possible as part of a major grant that they've given us for our work here at Hebrew College in spirituality and social justice leadership and preparing clergy for that. And I also want to say a special word of thanks to Marilyn Stern, who's pacing in the back. For attending to all of the details and sweating through the snowstorm. I'm sure that we all got here. Okay, so we're going to start with a first question, and we can go in either direction. So maybe Shosh will, for this one, we'll start with you. And I wanted to ask each of you if there's an early memory you can share about your own relationship with God or a sense of the sacred that you think had something to do with propelling you into your work for social justice in general or climate justice in particular?
So I was really lucky to be brought up to northern Vermont by my wonderful parents who are here today for summers when I was a kid, and waking up in the morning, getting up early and going out to do hitbodedut, which is the Hebrew term for being alone in a holy way and speaking your heart to God. I didn't know the term when I was a kid, but I did it, and I think that really speaks the power of that practice. And there were trees and plants and birds and insects, and I felt part of this great oneness. And even before those summers, I had felt a sense of great urgent mission. And you know, it's like you didn't know it, but I actually was the superhero who was going to save the world. And got a lot of the beautiful but also slightly hard messaging to kids in the 90s of you can be anything and you can change the world, which actually put a lot of pressure on a lot of us, even though it was also empowering. And I think in those moments while I was going and doing hitbodedut among the grasses, part of what I was feeling was a sense of great belonging and great responsibility and a real sense of imminent presence of God, but also the greatness of the Holy One and my place being close to that holiness, and developing some sense of my own theology now, which is really of a close, intimate, personal God and also this cosmic, sacred presence. And that's, you know, one piece of where it started.
So I was trying to, when I thought of this question, sort of remember a moment, particularly as a child, but I thought it was important to note the church community and the preschool that I went to. So my parents were part of the early generation of Black students that came to Harvard, MIT, Wellesley. You know, there was a whole sort of crew of them that came here, and their families, you know, couldn't have prepared them because there weren't Black people that were legacy students at that time, really. Many of them joined a church in Cambridge called St. Paul AME Church, which was led by a young pastor who would go on to do a lot of things. He just retired as a bishop in the AME Church after, so he's, you know, but back then, he was, you know, a young guy, and so I grew up in that church, and they had started a preschool called the Henry Buckner School, and that's where we all went to school. I was there, my cousins were there, my aunt eventually became a teacher there. And what was really powerful about that space, particularly as a Black woman in America, is that I did have the same sense that I could do anything. And that's not, unfortunately, the experience that most young Black people have, even now. And there was this amazing sense of possibility. So as an example, Rosa Parks came to visit our school, and I remember we reenacted the bus boycott for her. Although now I'm like, she knows what happened. She didn't really mean that, but she was a huge early childhood advocate, so that was great. Ronald McNair, the first Black astronaut, used to teach Taekwondo in the basement of our church. And so I think in that place, there was never a distinction between our faith and our calling. We always, you know, in that same way, had this sense that, you know, we were the descendants of people who had given everything so that we could have the freedom that we had, and that we had a responsibility to ask what was the next space and place that we need to push towards to get to where our people needed to be, and really where the world needed to be. So, you know, I never remember, I mean, even when I would get in trouble, my dad would say things like, you know, it's not that we want to punish you, but we know that you're called to greater things than how you're called. And I used to be like, could you just give me a spanking and shut up? I have to admit, I didn't want to hear the lecture, but, you know, there was this deep sense that God has uniquely called you to something, and to be in a community where everything communicated that to me. I didn't realize how much of a gift it was until I moved to other places where there were those same strong messages. So, yeah.
I'm realizing that the three of us on the panel I'm the only one who did not remain in the faith tradition of my childhood. I was raised high Episcopalian in a conservative parish in Plainfield, New Jersey. And I tell my friends who are Episcopal priests that if they had been my priest, I might still be an Episcopalian, but they weren't and I'm not. I think of my Christian upbringing as all guilt, no grace. I didn't learn about grace until I got to seminary. Yeah, it was that kind of place. So I think, trying to make that connection with the faith of my childhood, I think what I retained was this yearning for goodness. And the shallow side of that is the desperation to be good, to earn grace, to earn my goodness, instead of understanding that was inherent and God-given. But in terms of the calling to justice, what I remember from my childhood was the day when I was 10 years old and I saw the television news footage from Birmingham, Alabama. And I saw kids not much older than me, maybe in some cases not older than me, being set upon by police dogs and attacked with fire hoses and the unleashing of police violence on kids who were just trying to end segregation. And at 10 years old, I just knew that was just so profoundly wrong. And somehow I felt just called by conscience to do something about it. Now, I didn't do anything about it when I was 10, but I became, that I think really formed my worldview. There were things that were terribly wrong, and we could do something about it.
And maybe I'll ask you to continue on this next one, which is I wanted to ask about the place of music for each of you, and it feels so deeply woven into the fabric of both your activism and your religious life. But could you reflect a little bit on?
Music really led me to politics because I was born in 1952, so I fell in love with folk music of the early 60s, and that led me immediately to a bunch of left-wing Connie Pinkos, which was fabulous. So I was learning about the world by Broadside Magazine, the one out of New York, not the one out of Cambridge, which printed early Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes, Tom Paxton, Alvina Reynolds. I was singing The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll before my voice changed. I was singing The Ballad of William Worthy by Phil Oakes before my voice changed. I was singing Daily News by Tom Paxton before my voice changed. And these days, of course, Daily News is like one of the more authoritative news sources. In those days, it was on the sketchier side of fake news. But times change. So that led me into a social justice orientation and a peace orientation. I heard Phil Oakes sing I Ain't Marching Anymore in 1965 when I was 12 years old, and it just shattered. It just rocked my world. So I learned very early the power of people singing and singing together, and the two roles of music, the persuasive power to actually change people's minds as it changed mine, and then the empowering and community building function where you're singing together. And sometimes they say, well, aren't you just singing to the choir? Yeah, well, the choir needs help. The choir needs encouragement.
So, I also grew up in a tradition where music was really key. And I remember as a kid, I was in the Angels Without Wings. That was the name of our children's choir.
You're still an angel.
What's interesting is, so I love my mom, and she has encouraged me in so many ways, but not as a singer. And I do remind her of this. So the weird thing is that, I always sang in the choir, but not usually a solo. And so our church, my parents, the church that we are, now it's like 600 people, but it started in our dining room with 12 people. And eventually we moved to a nursing home, and decided that we weren't gonna have a choir. There wasn't even enough room to fit a choir up there, but they hired a minister of music and decided that the young people, we would be the choir for the church. And so I remember, I had to join really because this is what our congregation was, 60 people, so everybody who was in the right age range had to join this choir. And I remember it's actually Sister Linda Brown San Martin, who would have wanted to be here, but isn't able to be here. And she said to me, you talk so loud. I don't know what that anemic little voice it is that you've got coming out, because I would sing in my head voice and I would sound really quiet. And she was like, oh, no. And so she was the first person that would, she'd literally put her hand on your stomach and say, you need to push that air out. You're just singing from the wrong place. And she helped me to find my voice such that then I couldn't control it. So sometimes she made me stand backwards so that other people could hear their part. She was like, we're not going back to that choir book. So you just turn around so everybody else can hear. But you still sing from that place. And so, so that's, really, I always loved music. My mom loved Motown. My mother also loved musicals. So everybody in my family can sing all the words to West Side Story. All of them. I do look at it now, and I'm like, there's some racial things we should be thinking about, but I still love West Side Story, even South Pacific, which is even more problematic. But, I think, and then also hip-hop, really came of age when I was a young person. And so, for me, I remember Public Enemy. I remember when hip-hop had me wearing an Africa medallion. We also wore pacifiers, which I don't get why that was not a trend, but, so that since that music spoke to what was happening, growing up in the 80s, growing up in the time of the war on drugs, which really just felt like a war on our neighborhood. And so, I think there's many, both the church music and Motown and the musicals and hip hop really formed the different sides of who I was, and all of those different pieces sustained me at different times in my life.
And thinking about this question, I think the two words, well, there's more, but the two that I want to highlight around the role of music for me are around interpersonal connection and community, and the role of music as a leading force and a prophetic force. So it starts with a story that I'm really just sort of remembering as I'm sitting here, and my mom's in the audience. And when I was very, very young, she would sing a note to me, she was putting me to sleep, and I would match the tone. And our mouths were, a couple inches apart. And I remember that if we could really get it, and we often did, there was no sense of separation between the sound coming out of her mouth and the sound coming out of my mouth, and it was just sort of this beautiful womb of sound. And that is such a powerful body image for what music does, which is that we can actually transcend our own bodies and create something together as a community or as a family, where it's both of us and also in the room among us. And music has been the way that one of the many ways that love is expressed in my family of origin, both musicals and singing to get through long car rides and music parties, lots of folk singing. I realized when I started to really fall in love with the Siddur, with the Hebrew prayer book, that Rise Up Singing had in many ways been my Siddur growing up. And that this collection of Americana and the songs that were of the both silly and fun and the struggle songs had been a real go-to collection of essentially secular liturgy that, in addition to the Jewish spaces that I was singing and praying in as a kid, the living room was a place of, we didn't call it prayer, but it really was. And the other place of connection was B'nai Or, where many of you met me when I was very little and are here tonight, which I so appreciate. It's great. Stick in your hometown and you get this wonderful community of people. and follow around and support you. But B'nai Or, when my dad was leading, we would do so much singing in a circle, and the nigunim, the wordless melodies that we would sing, is where I found my voice in community and learned to harmonize and learned to sing some note that was different than the one that someone next to me was singing, and learned that that was a place that God dwelled in that music. And then the other piece for me is really the role of music as a prophetic voice of leadership and a moral compass that we can put ourselves in alignment with, and that started in large part for me at the Atrium, which was an elementary school that I attended, still around in Watertown, and we had assemblies every Friday, and a lot of the songs that we would sing were justice-oriented. Harriet Tubman and Sia Hamba were some of the first songs that I remember singing as a kid and helping to lead as I got older within the elementary school. So I sort of had this sense that music was something that I could have real agency in and find my voice both within the collective and be able to lead people through. And then in 6th grade, we watched a lot of Eyes on the Prize, the documentary about the civil rights movement, and my heart was just burst open by the role of music in that movement, and I felt so, I felt FOMO. You know, it was like, I missed that. and I think that...
Explain what FOMO is.
Oh, I'm sorry, fear of missing out.
Yeah, because it's the fact of missing out.
It was the fact of missing out. I had missed being in a black church in the South in the 60s, and in that case, I had, the great safety and privilege of being a white Jew in Newton in the 90s, but there was some power that I could recognize even through the screen of the television that was wheeled into my 6th grade classroom. There was a power on the other side of that screen that I could recognize that came from the people coming together through the music, and from the music both giving the message that they needed to hear, but also that the music was a way of communicating that we can do this. And that when we're singing, and I think this is your line, Fred, a singing movement can't fail. And I used to think that wasn't quite true, because of course we could fail a campaign and we could fail, and climate change is going to be catastrophic really no matter what. But I now understand that to be so true, because a singing movement cannot fail on the realm of the human spirit. It will always succeed in bringing people together and in inspiring us to action and to our hearts opening. And to move into a little more music, surprised me to call my parents up to sing one of these songs that we would sing in these singing parties. It's a song called Rain Night by Sidney Callett. Thank you. Rain Night, as you'll hear, is an anthem of its own. The verses speak of acting for justice. And when I was a kid, the verses made sense to me. The chorus speaks of love, and love as a sustaining force. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand what the verses and the chorus had to do with each other. And in the last 2 years, working with these people and with many of you in this room, and finding my voice in the climate movement and injustice through Temple Sinai and beyond, I now deeply understand what the chorus and the verses have to do with each other. Great. So my mom, Joyce, my dad, Liv. My dad was sitting there. Yeah.
That's hello, can you hear that? I love you already, and the reason because I love you, I have to tune my guitar.
If I stood out in the rain night, my only light, this candle, a million miles away, would you lay I took no food on this one day. My only life is water, a life or more, a wayward a child more than live. No cries of hunger, all cries, would they not start again? Oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. Oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. Wow. I just have to add, there's a, it's not polite to brag, but there's a nice Yiddish word, kvel, which it sounds nicer than bragging, so, but, it's really taking pride in something, so I just want to add that if that was not enough, that you should all know that when Shosh was, I guess in your last year? Second to last. He came when I was in Europe.
Her father, Lev, started in the rabbinical school here, so he too will be ordained as a rabbi. Really, it's not too far off. 3 semesters, but who's counting? You've already spoken in some way. Everything okay? Yeah. You've already spoken in.
Is your cell phone on?
Okay. Everybody hear that? If you could turn off your cell phones, they're interfering with the flight. The next question I wanted to ask has to do with the question of hope and what sustains you and reorients you and grounds you when hope is more difficult maybe to access. And I feel myself asking, and the question is always there, but I feel myself asking it with sort of a deepening sense of urgency, verging on hysteria, panic, right? But that's the question. Hope, reorienting, where do you go?
I think it's always helpful for me to distinguish between hope and optimism. As a climate activist, I am deeply pessimistic. But hope is an orientation of the heart, an orientation of the spirit. I've studied Buddhism and practiced Buddhist meditation, and hope is sort of problematic in Buddhism. But I've decided that I've got to be a hope guy. Dr. King said that all things are achieved by hope. And where I go to sustain my spirit is to silence, to meditation, to prayer, to connection with the transcendent, the eternal, the divine. because that's where my ultimate loyalty is. I'm called to do the best I can in this life. I think this is not my only life. And I'll do what I can, but I have to step back from, and here's the Buddhist part, from attachment to the result. I can't control the result. So I'll do my part, and then hopefully get a good night's sleep at the end of the day, and wake up refreshed for the struggle the next day.
I think sharing your original language, which I find helpful, was what reorients and what regrounds you when you find yourself feeling either confused, fearful, hopeless, or just tired. And I often feel just tired, as my husband knows. And I struggle a lot with, I think, the hopeless and the tired, and also with grief. And some of the power that I think I have found, which, is counterintuitive, and yet probably for many of us in the room, one of these like, yes, we know, and yet it's hard to do, is that actually letting ourselves grieve is where the hope starts to grow, and that somehow leaving myself without really going into the grief of what is happening to our world, what has been lost and what will be lost, robs any soil that hope might grow from. It robs it of any water or sunlight. It can't grow without actually feeling the depth of that. And Rabbi Kidian, who's here today, is a wonderful teacher and chaplain around that kind of grief. And it's very real. And for me, what is happening to the natural world when I was a kid, I empathized very deeply, and still do, with especially with the non-human world, and felt a sort of suffocation when there was pavement all around, or terror and sadness when I saw an animal suffering, and spent much of my childhood and adolescence running from that despair and running from that pain without, understandably, not having at that age those coping skills. And since then have found a lot of support in being able to cry and being able to really feel the sadness, and then out of that, find places of hope. And for me, hope comes a lot in creativity, writing seeds, writing tide, which we'll sing later, writing sermons, writing poetry, making art. These are ways that I feel like I'm tapping into God and tapping into the creative life force that feels very real and very much the birthright of all of us, and a real antidote to the despair. Another one is something that Cheryl Strayed's mom told her, Cheryl Strayed, the author, which is put yourself in the way of beauty. And I found, especially since the election, that I really need to put myself in the way of beauty and be listening to a lot of music and be outside a lot and be looking at art and just physically remind myself that this world is a beautiful, miraculous place, because otherwise the news would have me believe it's not. And then the other piece is sort of obvious, but is prayer. And I do a lot of personal prayer to a personal God, and connect and ask God for help, and ask God for help with the grief and for help with the hopelessness. And a lot of my time in rabbinical school was learning the language of Jewish prayer, and then also learning how to not worry about not getting that particularly right, and getting to pray from my heart while feeling grounded in the Jewish tradition. And that's a lot of what continues to ground me.
So I think, I start from the recognition that I am called to be a human being and not a human doing. That God does not ask me to be successful, God asks me to be faithful. And so I think it's similar, I do care about the outcome, I do care about the result, but I ground my practice in the practice, So I have a number of different things that ground me. Silence is an important part of my tradition. I should say tradition is sort of my practice, because it's only been a couple of years now that I've been embracing that as a part of my practice. So I think the other thing, and I think, speaking most deeply to this moment, the people that I'm most afraid of are the people who don't feel. And so the one thing I know is I never want to be in a place where I don't feel, because that is where most atrocities begin. And so I think the feeling in and of itself is a gift. It is it is a reminder that I am connected to God, that I am hurting about the same things God is hurting about, and I wouldn't want to be in a different place. But I think the other thing for me is, it's been very interesting to see what things have been like after the election and sort of the difference in sort of how different people are feeling. And I have to say, two things. One, I am certainly not happy in this moment. There are many other outcomes that I wish, but to some extent, I recognize it would be a slight to my ancestors to imagine that I am in the worst possible moment, because they were in much worse moments. I don't believe that I'm going to get whipped. We don't know where we're going, but I hope that is not a place that we're going. And so I recognize that they gave their lives so that I would have the strength for a moment such as this. And that I believe there's a verse in the New Testament that talks about the great cloud of witnesses. And I didn't realize till later that this was not a part of every Christian theology, because we talked about it so much and then I realized that it's not in the scripture that much. But the idea that there is this great, it talks about you running a race and that there's this great cloud of witnesses that is there for you. We grew up always believing that, like my mom would tell us that Harriet Tubman was in the great cloud of witnesses. And so this idea that there were all these folks who, with far less privilege than we had been dreaming and praying and hoping and thinking of us. And they were cheering us on, right? And I believe that that's very, very, very true in this moment. I believe that their spirit is available to us if we ask for it. And what's beautiful for me is that more people are asking for it than were before. I am a person that lives between a very privileged life and a very privileged world, and I'm also very keenly aware of where moments when I don't have privilege, right? And I see people awakening in a way they weren't before. Even friends that I know who've always, been doing social justice work are awake in a way they weren't before. And I have to believe when that many people begin to awake, it creates a space for the Spirit to be more powerful than she was before. And I love it because, ironically, in many millennial circles, we call about people who have a certain level of consciousness, you call them woke. And that was a term that, existed, I don't know when I started, but I can't remember, but, and I think a lot of people are getting woke. Really getting woke in a real way. In a way that they're willing to give at a level that they weren't before, right? People came to me and said, I've been working a lot around the sanctuary movement. People are like, I have an extra bedroom. What can I do? 6 months ago, they were not thinking that, right? So what I believe is that we will stop giving from a place of comfort and start giving from the place we have always been required to give from. And that, in my opinion, is earth-shattering in ways that I'm thankful for. And again, there are going to be there's some challenging times ahead. But I take deep solace in what I think is happening in the new connections that our church was never talking about being a sanctuary church. Immigration wasn't on people's radar. And now we're having some deep conversations about what we can do and what does it mean that we have a shower in our rectory, right? People are seeing things that they never paid attention to before. And that, I think, is a powerful thing. So, yes, I do have the fear, but I also have the deep excitement about what starts to happen when people start being with each other in ways that they were not willing to do when they were more comfortable. And I think that could be a legacy. That is what is required. That is what is required to face climate change and decide that we won't let our brothers and sisters die. not the people in Tuvalu. Their island isn't going to make it. But I believe now that there are people who are going to stand up and say, no, I've got an extra benefit. And I think that's a powerful thing. So I want to share a song that I learned from my grandmother, who was not an activist, but she was a Sunday school teacher and a public school teacher and a person who would go around the neighborhood and tell people they need to get it together. And extremely loving to us. And yeah. The song says, I don't feel no waste time. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me the road would be easy, but I don't believe you've brought me this far to leave me. I don't feel no waste time. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me the road would be easy, and I don't believe you brought me this far to leave me. No, I don't believe you brought me this far to leave me.
We actually wanted to sort of pause in the flow here and really, Mariama, about the song and what you were saying just before you sang about people waking up and people seeing each other and being with each other and what that makes possible. Really feels like it speaks exactly to what we wanted to ask folks to do now for about 2 minutes. In case you haven't already gathered, nobody up here is about sort of saying that they have all the answers. So we wanted to actually invite you to speak to each other for a minute, turn to somebody next to you, and for yourselves, just speak to the question that Fred and Mariama and Shosh just spoke to, which is the question of what reorients you, what replenishes you, what gives you hope when you are feeling whatever it is you're struggling with, whether it's the grief, confusion, despair. Just sort of a moment, if you can share that with each other. We'd like to bring that into this space as well.
Picture.
That's okay. It's like an alley there, and we've already communicated. Thank you.
Just older enough to sort of remember the places in the 60s.
Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? This song was written by Guy Carawan and Lucy Murphy, inspired by the spirituality of the South Carolina Sea Islands. Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Please rise in body or in spirit. Sing this song with us. Ain't you got a ride? Let's move the response part until they get there. Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? So rocky the road, so dangerous the journey, so dangerous the journey. We got a ride, we got a ride, ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? 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 Tree of life. We come from a distance. We come from a distance. We come from a distance. And we got a ride. And we got a ride. Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? To the tree of life. Our lives will be sweeter. Our lives will be sweeter. Our lives will be sweeter. 'Cause we got a ride. Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Next to you, if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. Ain't you got a ride? 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 Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you
head on into the moment that we're in. And again, Mariama, you took us there a little bit. But if you could each speak a little bit to the question of how the recent presidential election has affected you, the communities you're serving, and the sense of what you are called to do. Fred, why don't we, you want, yeah.
I suspect many of you have already read Rabbi Shoshana's reflections on her Facebook page. And I was, and I won't assume that you have, but I was struck by her saying that as a climate activist, she was in a kind of spiritual and emotional sense prepared for despair, for acknowledging how gravely tragic our situation is. And I was struck because I've been thinking the same thing, that as a climate activist, you know, we've been walking these fields for years, looking at the science and saying we are in deep, deep, deep trouble. And make no mistake, the election of Hillary Clinton would not have suddenly rescued us from that profound trouble. So I think all the work, the grief work, the meditation, the contemplation that we've done, looking into a pretty dire future. You know, like, okay, so Trump's elected, oh yeah, well, yeah, and this too, as the Buddhists like to say. At the same time, as a climate activist, I'm particularly, I mean, you know, so many vulnerable populations are made more vulnerable by the Trump ascendancy, not only by his personal power as president, but by the forces that he has unleashed and given credibility and a kind of respectability to. Very, very troubling. And I enjoy all kinds of privilege personally as a white male citizen, etc. That when my daughter, the morning of the election, she said, we've got to move to Canada. And I said, sweetheart, we can't move to Canada because we've got to stay and defend those who are more vulnerable than we are. And as a climate activist, I look at 4 years of accelerated or attempt to accelerate fossil fuel development and to say that I can't quantify it, but I expect it will cost millions of lives. Millions of lives. The delta, the difference between even a Hillary Clinton presidency and the Trump presidency. So it is deeply, deeply tragic. What sustains me is what has always sustained me, which is the power of love, connection to the divine, and the excitement of organizing and working together with other folks. That doesn't change. That did not change on November 8th or November 9th.
So to pick up, maybe Frederick mentioned, I wrote a little reflection on Facebook right before Shabbat, and essentially what I was able to articulate that I think this election particularly helped me to articulate is that in my understanding, we're fighting at least the climate battle on two fronts, and I think we're fighting all of these justice battles on the equivalent correlating fronts. One is the front in terms of climate of physics, and we've been losing that badly since I was learning for the first time about global warming in my third grade classroom. We were already in a bad situation then, and we have lost years and years of what we needed to be doing as a species, and that has been true, and that would have been true no matter who was elected. And the delta is deeply tragic. But the realm of physics is the realm that I always thought was the only one that counted, you can substitute physics for, the metrics, the numbers that you can measure wellness by, the GDP of justice, so to speak. And I somehow thought, until fairly recently, that was the only metric that mattered, that parts per million of CO2 was what I needed to judge my own activism by, and if what I was doing wasn't directly somehow helping the physics, then it wasn't worth doing at all. And when nothing that you can do has a guarantee of it all coming even close to actually bringing down parts per million of CO2, that leaves somebody who wants to be active in the world in quite a bind. And that was the pickle I was in for a long time, and in walked these folks into my life, and Marla and many others, and oh my gosh, there's another front that we're fighting on, and it's the front of the human spirit. And we're not losing that one. And that front isn't dependent on whether outrageously, I don't even have the word, outrageously unqualified and dangerous individuals are in power. Because that front is entirely in our hands, because the human spirit lives in each one of us, and is dependent on communities like this that come together, and so many others around the world. And once I was able to shift that metric in my mind, then I was able to see my climate work as an act of devotion, as an act of worship, as an act of prayer. You can't measure prayer. You don't know if it works. That's not the way prayer works. Science has tried to do that, and yet human beings have prayed for hundreds of thousands of years, I'm sure. And we will continue to do so. And in a way, writing "The Tide is Rising," that did not bring down parts per million of CO2. I wish so badly that it did, but it absolutely did not. And yet that was my offering into the world. And I think that way of thinking about things has really helped me after the immediate electionitis, where I almost felt, it was almost like an acute illness the first couple of weeks after the results came in. After that immediate piece wore off, I was able to realize that spot in me that was bookmarked from these years working in the climate justice movement, just the last couple of years, was activated. And was, oh, I know how to do this. I know this because it's been dire, and it's still dire, and we're going to show up anyway. And what I've seen that's so beautiful, to answer the piece about how it's affecting our congregation, I think for many of my congregants, the election was a pastoral emergency, essentially. We were all devastated together, and Rabbi Vogel and I were in that with folks. And then, as that immediate aftermath started to wane, the outpouring of desire to be of service has been overwhelming. Like literally overwhelming, such that Tzedek and Sinai, with whom I work well, we have to now have a spreadsheet of all the people interested in getting involved to keep track so that no one falls through the cracks. We didn't need a spreadsheet before. Maybe we could have used one, Zippy, right? But we didn't need one. And now it's, how do I meet Muslims? How do I meet immigrants? How do I get involved? They've been woke. And that is so beautiful. And they're waking me up, and it's just, and there's something about when we are confronted with great trial, to watch the human spirit be resilient is one of the most amazing things in my life. And I think, having been raised reading a bunch of young adult Holocaust literature, I think I wasn't naive that the world could change on a dime. The girls in those books, they grew up in a happy household and then their lives were taken from them. And I call on my Jewish ancestors and my great-grandparents who came out of a situation very, very bad in Europe, and they got here and they gave up so much so that we could be here. And there's a strength in the Jewish ancestry of survival and of resilience and of joy, no matter what, that I can see Temple Sinai tapping into, that I can feel in this room, that I'm really proud to be a part of.
So to what both of you shared, I think, and as I said, I think the awakening is really key. And I love when you were saying that the world can change in a dime. So I used to run a youth social justice arts organization, and we talked a lot about cultural organizing. And one of the things I would do is sometimes we'd give a workshop and people would say, well, what is cultural organizing? And we talk about, how so often we think of political power, we think of economic power, maybe even think of social power, but we never think of ideological power and a spirit power and the power of ideas and the stories that we tell ourselves. And so I remember I would, we'd begin going through the workshop, and somewhere in the workshop I would rip up a piece of green, construction paper, and nobody would even pay attention. We'd keep going on through the workshop, and then I would go to rip up a dollar bill, and people would like, oh my God, right, and I said, well, what's the big deal? Did you notice I ripped up a piece of green paper before? And they were, yeah, but this is a dollar bill. I said, they're both green pieces of paper, but we've invested value in this paper. I said, if we woke up one day and decided it wasn't valuable, it wouldn't be anything, right? The reality is that all of our systems stay in place because we invest in them, because we say that they're okay. And what's powerful to me is I think a lot of us are starting to say, you know what, some of these things that I thought this is just the way things are, there's really nothing we can do about it, we're starting to say, maybe there is something we can do about it. Like maybe we can't just keep accepting some of the things the way they are. And what I am thankful to Donald Trump is sometimes, not in the times when he's just making stuff up, but some of the times, I think he's actually speaking the truth about where we actually are. It's just hard to hear it. And it's hard to imagine that he would more deeply walk into some of the directions that maybe aren't so good, but I think there is a way in which, even myself included, I think a lot of us, or I know I specifically, I went and I knocked doors and I elected President Obama, and I went to the inauguration, and then I went back and did the same things I was doing before, because I thought they were all important, and I'm not saying they weren't. But somehow I believed that I needed to invest in getting this great leader. And what I realized over the last few years, and I still have deep belief in him as a good person, and also with other things, is that is not the seat of power. The seat of power is our belief and our willingness to stand back or stand up for what we believe. And I'm really excited to see people be more willing to stand up and say, actually, I don't believe that's the way it has to be. I don't care if it's been that way for the last 100 years. We could decide today that it isn't going to be that way, and we could imagine something new, right? I think the challenges, and I have been talking a lot about this because where I sort of struggle is half of the country did elect Donald Trump, or half of the electorate elected Donald Trump. I am not interested in deepening the divide between the half of us who didn't and the half of us who did. I look particularly, there was a time in my life, so I usually get into some subject and then I go get all the books I have to read on that subject so that I can feel like I know something. And there was a period of my life where I spent some time looking at Weimar Germany in the 1930s, right? And one of the things that was really problematic and difficult about that time is the sort of intense effort to divide people along the line of who really wants Germany to rise again and who doesn't want Germany to rise again, right? And once people started deciding, now probably each side thought that they were the side that really actually was trying to save the country, right? But that wedge that went between people and that said, there's one side or another side and you have to decide which side you're on, that is a deeply dangerous place to be. And so I want to stand up and speak out about where I want to see this country go, but I don't want to do it in a way that tells people, if you voted for him or you don't agree with where I am, you're on the side that's taking this country down and I'm on the side that's saving this country. Because I think that dynamic is a bad dynamic anywhere at any time. And it's actually not true. To really shift this, we need the creative energy of every single human being in powerful ways. There are communities that look nothing like mine that have some of the solutions to getting us to the world we need to be in. And so I want to resist in a way that is offering an invitation to people to say, I don't believe that the solutions will come from some person at the top. I believe the solutions come when we sit down around this table And we share our experiences, which are going to be radically different, and then we find the bridge that gets us to where we want to go. And the question is, how do you resist in a way that is a constant invitation for people to join you in a process of imagining? That's hard. No, I don't have that written down, but I will try to. So, yes, maybe I'll have a Facebook post tonight. But yeah, I mean, I think that is the real, that's where we have to go. And I'm going to name it. Like, I'm worried about some of our, I understand where people are coming from. I get it. Like, our church is looking at, if ICE comes to our door, just saying no, right? So I'm not saying that there don't need to be resistance. If there's a Muslim registry, I will be registering as a Muslim too. Come to my house too. Right? So I'm not saying that we don't have to do something. I'm just saying we need to walk a fine line between dividing people into camps. And so what I will say quickly, because I'm going to pass this to Fred, is that about 6 weeks ago now, I guess, I was in Standing Rock. And it was, people were like, how is it? I'm like, I can't give you a sentence that says how it was. But what I do think is there were all of the challenges that you expect. There were folks trying to negotiate across race, and there were folks with different perspectives on how to move forward, and all the things that you would expect when you bring that many people together. And yet I saw the seeds of the world that we need to move to there. I saw people embracing each other in really powerful ways. I saw people praying and embracing the power of spirituality to get us someplace that, just really good community organizing is just not going to get us. And I believe in community organizing, but it's not enough. And so I do believe that even in this challenging time, the seeds being buried is causing us to emerge as seeds. It's opening people in some powerful ways, and I think we need to lean into that because I believe that it is possible that 10 years or 20 years from now we will say this was the beginning of the moment when we decided that the world could be better than what we had accepted in the past. Yeah.
This evening has been scheduled for a long time, and we were alarmed to find that subsequently there was scheduled for tonight a fundraiser to benefit the Standing Rock Resistance. You'll find on your table a flyer about that concert, and you missed it, because unless through your spiritual advancement you have perfected by location, you have missed this concert, as we have. But we wanted to support the concert, and that's why we have the flyers on the table. You'll find a link that you can make make a donation to benefit from Blue Hills to Standing Rock in support of the indigenous water protectors resisting what they call the Black Snake pipeline that is being constructed there. I have also been to Standing Rock. I was there just 2 weeks ago at the Interfaith Day of Prayer, and I learned so much from being there. And I think as we look for models of resistance, indigenous people on this continent have been resisting for over 500 years, resisting theft, resisting genocide, and they're still here, and they're calling for nonviolence, they're calling for love, and they're calling for devotion in stopping not only this pipeline, but in transforming our relationship with energy, with each other, and with the natural world. So please support them. And also another thing that I've come to learn, and Marla Markham has been one of my teachers in that it's not enough just to support Standing Rock.
that there are indigenous struggles much closer to home. All of us dwell on Indian land, so all of us can look backward to that terrifying history, but also look forward to a vision of justice and of sovereignty for indigenous peoples. So we need to look closer at home also, and not just be just as tourists and say, oh, well, isn't that great what's happening in Standing Rock? So let's stay woke and get woke and look around and ask questions and take leadership from people who have been doing this for a long time. So I thought it would be appropriate to sing a song in solidarity with the Standing Rock movement and with indigenous struggles. And it's a song I wrote decades ago called The Heart of the Appaloosa. From the land of shooting waters to the peaks of the Coeur d'Alene, thimbleberries in the forest, elk grazing on the plain, the people of the Coyote made their camp along the streams of the green Wallowa Valley when fences had no name. And they bred a string of horses, the treasure of the tribe, who could toe dance on a ridge or gallop up a mountainside, who could haul a hunter's burden, turn a buffalo stampede. The horse that wore the spotted coat was born with matchless speed. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho. The heart of the Appaloosa never died. In the winter came the crowned ones, near frozen in the cold, bringing firearms and spyglasses and a book that saves the soul. The people gave them welcome, nursed them till their strength returned, and studied the talking paper, its mysteries to learn. In the shadow of the mission sprang up farms and squatter towns. The plain was lined with fences, the plow blades split the ground. In the shallows of the clear water, gold glittered in the pan. And the word would come from Washington, remove the Indian. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow, there's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho. The heart of the Appaloosa never died. The chief spoke to the people in his anger and his pain. I am the More Chief Joseph Rolling Thunder is my name. They condemn us to a wasteland of barren soil and stone. We shall fight them if we must, but we will find another home. They fled into the Bitterroot, an army at their heels. They fought at Whitebird Canyon, they fought at Misery Hill, till the colonel saw his strategy and sent the order down to kill the Appaloosa wherever it be found. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho. The heart of the Appaloosa never died. 1,200 miles retreating 3 times over the divide. The horse, their only safety, their only ally. 3,000 Appaloosas perished with the tribe. The people and the horses dying side by side. Thunder rolling in the mountains said my heart is sick and sad. Our children now are freezing, the old chiefs are dead. The hunger takes our spirit, our wounds are deep and sore. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho, but the heart of the Appaloosa never died. They were sent to Oklahoma, malaria ran rife, but more died of broken hearts, far from the land that gave them life. And the man once called Joseph at death was heard to say, we have given up our horses, they have gone away. But sometimes without warning from a dull domestic herd, a spotted horse of spirit, wondrous will emerge. Strong it is and fearless and nimble on a hill. Listening for thunder, the Appaloosa's living still. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho, but the heart of the Appaloosa never died. One more time. Thunder rolling in the mountains, lead the people across the great divide. There's blood on the snow in the hills of Idaho, but the heart of the Appaloosa never died.
We're going to close with a little. Yeah. We're going to close with a little bit more singing, and so before we do that, I want to just take a minute to thank all three of you for. So really, for your presence tonight, for your work in the world, and for just the heart and soul and depth of you shared with all of us tonight. I think we also wanted to just do a quick thank. I'd like to just lead with the music in our ears. So we have one more. Yeah. So we'll just.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I want to thank.
Take another mic. Take another mic.
Okay. How about now? Yeah. Okay. So I also want to take a minute to thank Sharon, who was so empowering of the others, she forgot to introduce herself when she started. Sharon Cohen Amsel, who is the Dean, Rabbi, and Dean of the People's College of Episcopal. And this was her vision. It really, really was. So, community organizing a la our tables. So to avoid a couple of us running around and having to clean up all these tables. If a couple of you would take responsibility, you can put anything that's not, that's still full of food or water or whatever onto the table where the tea is, but we also have trash barrels for bottles. We don't have composting. If someone composts and wants to take it home, feel free. And we have a place for the paper, your paper cups and all of that. So if you would be sure that your table is cleaned up and brought to the back, it would be so greatly appreciated. And now let's on to the music.
Invite you to rise again in the body or spirit. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising.
be